Digital town hall with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, presidential candidate. Thanks for being our leadoff hitter here.
Thanks for doing this.
We have been collecting questions from Iowans all across our state. We have a lot. We're going to get to as many of them as we can in an hour, so shall we just jump right in?
Let's roll.
All right, you're an old ball player from Yale. Not that you're old, but you know what I meant. So I'm going to start you with I'm going to give you about a batting practice fastball, okay, to get rolling on this. This is from Cassie from Western Iowa. She just says quite simply, are you really going to be better than Trump like you say you are?
Well, thanks for the question, Cassie. Yes, I'm running because I think that I'd be the best candidate for the party and that I would be the best president. And not just for one 4-year term, but actually for 2 4-year terms. We need a 2-term president to be able to fully turn this country around and to make a lasting change. I mean, I think a couple things. One, if you look at my record in Florida, I won the biggest election that's ever been won by a Republican. We need to win big across the country. We don't want to be waiting up 2 in the morning to be counting votes. We want a decisive victory. I'll deliver that. Second, you need somebody that's going to be able to deliver on all the promises. And I delivered on 100% of the promises that I made in Florida. And if you look at all the people that are causing so many problems with our open border, with the economic problems, all this stuff, I beat those people in Florida. We've racked up huge victories. Ultimately, leadership's about producing results. I also think it's important that you're able to recruit good people to serve in an administration. You can't do it by yourself. The president will set the agenda, make the decisions, but you got to have a cadre of good folks there that are doing that. I think the former president had trouble there. I think he'd have big trouble recruiting good people if he could even get elected again. I'm going to have great people around us, and you're going to see a big difference. This government has gotten out of control. We need to return it to its rightful owners, we the American people.
We had a handful of questions talking about the decision both in Maine and Colorado to keep the former president off the primary ballot, and Donald Trump was appealing that today. Jeff was among those who asked, and it's just asking simply, why do you support Trump in saying that this was not the right action? And just for a little background on this, the decision was made by these 2 respective secretaries of state in those states, saying that they felt that Trump was involved in what they considered an insurrection back on January 6th, 2021, on the attack by Trump supporters at the U.S. Capitol building. So why do you stick with Trump on that?
Well, I'm sticking with the Constitution. I mean, I think at the end of the day, when I was served in the Navy, I mean, I'm the only veteran running for president, and I'd be the first veteran elected since 1988 who served in a foreign war. I recall very distinctly taking that oath of office, and it was to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. It's an oath that I've taken as governor of Florida, and it'll be an oath, of course, that I would take as the president of the United States. So I have to call them like I see them when it comes with the Constitution. I don't think we want to go down the road where one bureaucrat in a Secretary of State's office can take somebody off the ballot and take away the opportunity for people to make a judgment. There are disabilities in the 14th Amendment for things like insurrection and rebellion, but what's the due process that a candidate would have? You don't even have to be convicted. If we start going down this road, what's to stop a Republican state from saying, 8 million illegals have come in under Biden. He's permitted an invasion. Can he be taken off the ballot? So I have to support and defend the proper interpretation of the Constitution as I see it. And even if it's one of my competitors, I'm going to do what's principled in my judgment. Now, I will just point this out. If any of the other candidates had been taken off the ballot, Trump would be spiking the football. I mean, let's just be clear. He would not come to anyone's defense, but I'll do it because I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, we have one more Trump question, kind of along these same lines. I believe you used to be able to hit the heat when you played baseball, so there is a little bit of heat at the end of this question, but it's from Terry Fitzgerald from Lamar's, and he's just asking, why do you protect Trump? What are you scared of? And we had a few questions like this, basically. Are you scared of Trump? Is that why you don't criticize him more? How do you address that?
Well, Terry, I take issue with that. I mean, I have rendered very sharp contrast between Donald Trump and myself with respect to policy. For example, he's running on a lot of the things he promised to do in 2016 and didn't deliver on. He said he was going to build a wall and have Mexico pay for it, didn't do it. He said that he was going to drain the swamp, didn't do it. He said he was going to eliminate the debt, and yet he added $7.8 trillion to the debt. So those were not things that he dealt with effectively. The Democrats seemed to beat him on the budget. The Democrats beat him by denying the border wall, and that's not going to happen with me. I'm going to get all these things done. If you look in Florida, not only did we not add to our state's debt, I paid down 25% of our state's debt just since 2019. We cut taxes every year. We banned sanctuary cities. We even helped transport illegal aliens to sanctuary jurisdictions like Martha's Vineyard, which really helped change the dynamic on that whole issue. So on issue after issue, we've actually delivered. And I've delivered on 100% of my promises. Donald Trump was not able to do that. But I also don't like the way he gets involved in some of the pettiness that he does. That's just not how I roll. We look higher. We set a good example. But we're tough when it comes to contrasting on issues, judgment, and results. I have the results. I'm right on the issues, and I'd be the better choice for president.
You mentioned the border, which foreshadows this next question from Carol Garvey in Sioux City. So she is looking for your 3 ideas when it comes to border security.
Well, thanks, Carol. I think this is a top priority for me. It'll be a day one priority. We will declare it to be a national emergency on day one. I'm going to have the military on the border to stop the invasion cold. But one of the things we have to do is people come illegally. We've had millions under Biden. I'm going to deport them back to their home country. You have got to do that. Donald Trump promised the largest deportations in history. He deported less, believe it or not, than Barack Obama even did. So I'm going to do that. Number 2, we are going to build the wall and have Mexico pay for it. How do you do that? Mexico's just going to give us money. You charge fees on the remittances that workers send overseas. That'll raise billions. We'll build the wall. But most importantly, we're going to hold the Mexican drug cartels accountable. I'm going to categorize them as foreign terrorist organizations. That's going to give us an ability to use deadly military force against them. But here's why. They are invading our country and poisoning our people by the tens of thousands. Every community in this country has now become a border community because of fentanyl going in. I've spoken with people here and parents here in Iowa and across this country who have lost kids to fentanyl overdose. And what you find is a lot of times they're not drug addicts. They may take one pill thinking it's something else. It happens to be laced with fentanyl, and they get poisoned to death. And this is happening all over this country. I'm sick of it. And as President of the United States, I'm not going to let it stand. You not only have a right, you have a duty to fight back. I will fight back against the Mexican drug cartels for you.
You mentioned deportations. Does everyone in this country illegally get deported?
Everybody is subject to that. I think we're going to do the Biden 8 million. That's a big task. Eisenhower had a program in the 50s, so we are going to do that. Here's the thing. If you don't do that, then people are going to continue to come illegally because they're going to say, okay, if you just get across the border, they give you a sheet of paper and tell you to what? Come to a trial 2 years into the future? It just doesn't work. And so you're going to see that. There is going to be a sanction. The rule of law is going to be enforced.
So how do you decide who would get to stay? If you've been here a certain number of years, is that
well, I don't think it's a question of saying anyone, quote, gets to stay. I think it's like, okay, you have limited resources. How do you apply those? So what we would do is we would focus on the people that have come under Biden, and we would clear those out. That's 8 million. That's not something that'll just happen at the drop of a hat. I mean, that's going to require a big effort, but we're going to do it because I don't think there's any other way that we're going to be able to secure our country. And here's the thing with what happened with the Biden people. You have people from over 100 different countries that have come. You have people from Iran and other Middle Eastern countries. China have come across the southern border. We have made ourselves vulnerable to a terrorist attack because of what's happened at the southern border. I think the president owes an obligation to stop the invasion and to send those people back to Iran or China or Russia or all these other countries.
Karen has a related question. Karen Thornton from Sioux City. The term she uses, some people won't like this term, but will you stop anchor babies from getting citizenship and then keeping the illegal family here? As you know, the policy here, and I believe this is in the Constitution, that if you're born in this country, then you would become you get citizenship. I believe former President Trump has talked about eliminating this. Where are you on this?
Well, former President Trump said that in 2016. He said that he was going to eliminate what's called birthright citizenship for illegal aliens. Now, obviously, American citizens, when they have a kid, you're a citizen at birth. Everyone agrees with that. And the 14th Amendment was ratified to overturn Dred Scott versus Sanford, which was a terrible Supreme Court decision to ensure that African Americans were citizens. It was not intended to mean if you come illegally and you have a baby that somehow the baby becomes a citizen, because that means you can't deport the illegal parents. So I think that that's been interpreted wrongly. And yes, we will ensure that there is not automatic birthright citizenship for illegal aliens. I think it creates a bad incentive. If you just get across the border and you're here illegally and you have a child, then all of a sudden that's basically your ticket to stay in this country. That was not what that was intended to do. There will be litigation on that. It will likely be decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. But yes, we are going to end the practice and fight that fight.
I have talked to some Iowa Christian conservatives who have followed how you flew out some migrants from Texas, flew them to Martha's Vineyard, and had Florida taxpayers pay for that. They are saying that while they want more focus on border security, they do not, frankly, feel that is a Christian-like effort to take people from one state, move them to another, and then whatever the process is, to get them taken care of or whatever, what have you, in Martha's Vineyard. How do you respond to that?
Well, actually, I mean, I don't think that that's a good analysis. I mean, these were people that were basically destitute. Biden wasn't doing anything. He's letting them in, and they're basically on the streets. And so they were transported to a sanctuary jurisdiction of Martha's Vineyard, partially because the policy should be they shouldn't come in illegally, period. But if Biden's letting them in, they should go to sanctuary jurisdictions. Martha's Vineyard's very wealthy. They had an office saying that they want anyone to come regardless of status. They held themselves out to be a sanctuary jurisdiction. That was much better for the illegal aliens to be in Martha's Vineyard than where they were. So if you don't like it because you think Martha's Vineyard came out looking bad because Martha's Vineyard wouldn't even take 50, well, that's fine. But it was definitely better for the illegal aliens. And that just shows you Martha's Vineyard, one of the wealthiest enclaves in the country, obviously very liberal, likes open borders. They wouldn't even accept 50. We have communities across this country that are being overwhelmed. Medical system, hospitals, schools, all these other things. And when we sent that, and when Texas has sent to some of these blue enclaves, that has caused the issue to rocket to the front of center. And that's really, I think, we have to have an honest conversation about this. So it was the right policy. It had a huge impact on elevating this. Now they're even talking about the open border in enclaves like Manhattan, where you have a lot of liberal voters, because they're seeing the impact on their communities. And I think we all can agree, you cannot have a country if just millions of people are flooding in. It just doesn't work.
But why is that? Why not do that from people who might be in your state illegally?
Well, they did come to Florida, and then they were taken from Florida to Martha's Vineyard. So that did happen.
Okay. All right. So money matters here. We had a lot of these, as you might guess. This one is looking for kind of somebody comparison shopping here. This is from Maria. How are your economic policies for blue collar workers better than Donald Trump's policies back from when he was president? How would you address that? And we'll get to the tax cuts in a sec.
Well, Maria, I would say that as governor of Florida, our economic record is second to none. Florida is rated the #1 economy of all 50 states. We're one of the few places where incomes have actually gone up more than the prices have. Because when I talk to Iowans, one of the things, and actually people over the country, they're working hard, but because of the Biden inflation, they feel like they're losing ground. It's hard to afford a new home when interest rates have gone up so much. Florida's been one place, even though we've had to deal with that, the economy's done well, so you've seen rising incomes. I think that that's important. And if you look at 2020, that was a terrible year for this country. The first 3 years of Trump, I think the economy was sound. The fourth year, because he initiated the lockdowns with Anthony Fauci, that was devastating. The reason Florida did well is because we bucked Fauci. and we bucked the Trump administration and had kids in school and had the businesses back open in no time. That's caused the state to really boom. I would also say we've done a much better job fiscally than Donald Trump did. He added $7.8 trillion to the debt in a 4-year period. Since I've been governor, we've cut taxes every year, big time. We've run budget surpluses, and I've actually paid down 25% of the state's total debt from the time Florida was a state until the present. We've knocked off 25%. Wouldn't it be nice to have somebody in Washington that could actually reduce some of the debt? It's almost unheard of that would be the case. So I think our fiscal record is second to none. Our jobs, and we have the #1 fastest growing state, and with the migration. And then the final thing I would just say is the size of government. Florida has millions of more people than the state of New York, which is our closest population-wise, and yet our budget's half the size of New York State's budget, and our number of state employees per capita is the lowest in the United States. And yet, when people move to New York to Florida, what do they tell me? You have better infrastructure, better roads, better services, better schools. So we're able to do that at half the cost and half the footprint. It shows you that this federal government is way too big. We need to reduce the size and the scope of government. Donald Trump did not reduce government at all when he was president. We need to do that. The bureaucracy is totally out of control, and I'll be the guy to come in there and bring it to heel.
I mean, your winters may help a little bit too.
Well, look, we have great weather, but I think in the winter, but I think the reality is we've always had that. California has great weather, and yet people are fleeing California in record numbers, and they're coming to Florida. So yes, it's part of that. Now, I have said this. I think it would be totally appropriate to try to have a satellite Iowa caucus location in Naples, because I've got so many people from the
Democrats did
Midwest.
that last
You know,
cycle.
I've got Iowans, and sometimes I'll run into some of these folks and they'll tell me, "Oh yeah, we're going down to Florida in January." I'm like, "Are you going before the caucus or after?" Some of them are going after, but some of them are saying, "Well, we're going to go for, maybe we'll come back." No, please come back. But in the interim, man, maybe we need to look into doing that.
You mentioned the debt and spending, and I'm watching some of these questions come in real time here. We have probably about a half dozen here that more or less are saying, give people something tangible here. What is something when it comes to federal spending? And here's a chunk here. This one specifically talking about more federal coming in that you receive in Florida than you get in
Yeah,
federal
no,
taxes.
John, with all due respect, that is a total misnomer. What that is saying is that that's counting Social Security benefits. That's not the state of Florida getting money from the federal government. That's people's Social Security benefits. Yes, we have some senior citizens in Florida, but that's not welfare. They paid into that program, and it's going to individuals. So we are not on the dole from the federal government. The only way you can make that argument, and a lot of liberals have done that, and it's very dishonest, is to count the Social Security benefits as somehow Florida's getting all this. The state of Florida, of course, does not get any Social Security benefits. Those are senior citizens' benefits that they have earned. So we've done it right in Florida. We run a tight ship, very fiscally responsible. And then the results, though, you know, you look at our budget's half the size of, say, New York, yet education. We're ranked #1 in education by U.S. News and World Report. Our state university system is now ranked #1 by U.S. News and World Report. We're not spending more on K-12, certainly, than New York and California, but we're getting much better results. Part of that is because we have universal school choice, and we're empowering parents to make the best decisions for their kids.
All right, let's dig in a little bit on spending, since I mentioned we're getting a bunch of them concerning that. When Donald Trump ran back in 2016, he had talked about that he would be able, I think at the time he said 4 or 5 years, would be able to balance the budget. In the end, they added about $8 trillion to the federal debt, which is now roughly around $34 trillion or so. What is something practical you can tell folks about when is a balanced budget possible? Is that something that can even happen in one term? Does that take you to the second term? And can you give them something concrete and maybe even a little bit simplistic to figure out how you're going to make that kind of sizable cuts?
Yeah, well, first of all, Trump didn't just promise a balanced budget. He said he would eliminate the national debt. So that's much more than a balanced budget. And he added $7.8 trillion in just a 4-year period. Just to put that in perspective, our first 210 years as a country, from 1789 to when the Constitution came to 2000, it was about 5.6 trillion over that whole period. And now we're sitting at like 34 trillion. So that they've not been able to get it done. Biden, Trump, Obama, none of them have gotten it done. What are we going to do? One, we need to put the spending levels back prior to COVID. That would save hundreds of billions of dollars. They ratcheted up the spending during COVID. I think that was a huge mistake. If you look at how they handled all that printing of money has led to you paying more for prices, because when you print money, of course you're going to get inflation. It's driven us deeper into debt. It's caused interest rates to go up. And now you have massive amount of money for interest on the debt. So bring that spending back to where we were 4 or 5 years ago, freeze that in place for the non-defense, and then get the interest rates down so that you can handle the debt without having this drop 800, 900 billion or $1 trillion a year. We used to be at $200 billion a year to finance the interest on the debt. That has gone up because of the fiscal mismanagement that we're dealing. And then I think reducing the size of government. We're going to reduce the bureaucracy through attrition, through layoffs. We're also going to take about 50,000 bureaucrats, put them in a Schedule F who have policy-making positions. They will be fireable at will. So we're going to take the lessons from Florida that you can discharge the core functions of government with a small footprint. We end up saving a lot more money as a result of that. And I've been willing to veto spending in Florida. 1 year I vetoed 3% of the budget. If Congress is putting these jalopy of a budgets on my desk, I'm going to be willing to veto it, send them back, and make them spend less.
So can you get balanced budget within the first 4 years, or is it too much to do that?
I think you could. I think the issue is I need a Congress that's going to work with me. I'm going to work very hard to help elect a lot of Republicans to the House and Senate in 2024. And I think, like in Florida, I won big, and we had a lot of people sweep in with us. It's a team effort. You got to do it. But I also think this is a time for putting your money where your mouth is, because Republicans have been running for years claiming they want less government and fiscal responsibility. They haven't really delivered it in Washington for an awful long time. I think the last time we've had a balanced budget was in the late 90s when you had a Republican Congress. Haven't seen much there. So at some point, you've got to deliver on being fiscally responsible. The Democrats are honest about what they want to do. They just want to tax and spend. They don't make any bones about that. Republicans have been promising fiscal responsibility and have failed to deliver. We delivered it in Florida, and we'll deliver it. But here's one thing I do think we just need to look long term. We need structural reform in Washington. The reason why we have what we have is because the incentives are to have more debt and to have this behavior. We need term limits for members of Congress so that they can get things done, then go back and live under the laws that they pass. We need a balanced budget amendment to require a balanced budget in the Constitution. And then we need to give the president the line item veto authority. As governor, I can line item individual items out of the budget without having to veto the whole budget. And as president, right now, president's got to sign the whole doggone thing or veto the whole doggone thing. But they're spending your tax dollars to do things like promote transgenderism in Bangladesh. How is that something that is worth tax dollars? And yet that's there. Wouldn't it be good if a president could veto all that pork out there? We would save tens of billions of dollars in no time.
Didn't Newt Gingrich say those same three things, though, back in the Republican Revolution in '94?
Yeah, but here's the thing: they were one vote away from a balanced budget amendment. Mm-hmm. They passed the line item veto. It got struck down by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said you can't do it statutory. And term limits is the most popular thing. But here's what I'm going to do: I'm not going to try to do it through Congress, because I know Congress isn't going to do it. We'll do it through the states under the Article 5 of the Constitution. Florida has already certified these. Other states have certified it. I'll use the bully pulpit to work with the states to be able to certify amendments. It's perfectly in the Constitution, and it's because the Founding Fathers realized if you want to reform the nation's capital, a lot of times the swamp critters aren't going to want to be the ones to do it, so you got to go around them.
Okay, I talked about the tax cuts before and got ahead of myself. Question coming in from Dubuque about the tax cuts from 2017. A chunk of these will expire in 2025, primarily the ones that had to do with personal income tax, not necessarily on the corporate side. As you look at what Republicans passed with Trump as president, Republicans controlling the chambers, what changes, if any, would you do regarding taxes? Or would you just extend them?
Right. Look, we cannot allow taxes to go up. So we will make those rates permanent. On the personal side, people need to have certainty to know, particularly small businesses who oftentimes pay at that personal rate, that those are going to be the rates, and that's how we're going to go forward. We do not have a revenue problem in this country. In fact, 2022, I think it was the highest percentage of GDP we've had in revenue since World War II. We have a spending problem in this country, so we are not going to let those tax rates go up.
Okay, one thing that is a money matter in this state that kind of cuts into a lot of different topics is these carbon sequestration pipelines. There were 3 projects, now it's primarily just 2, but we had a whole host of questions on this. I'll just pick one of them, and it's from Cindy in Denison. And she's looking specifically at the process of, would you support taking land by eminent domain for a private company for the private gain? And as you know, these companies say that this would essentially be the last resort if they can't reach a mutual deal with these landowners. How do you look at that?
Cindy, I do not think that that's an appropriate use of eminent domain. Eminent domain is for public use. And so there was a situation in Connecticut that went all the way to the Supreme Court called Kelo versus City of New London, where they eminent domain a woman's home because they had a private development that would be more lucrative for the community. I thought that that was an abuse. The Supreme Court mistakenly upheld that. So I've long been a critic of expansive use of eminent domain. Eminent domain is something that is a legitimate power that our founders recognized, but it's limited. It's limited to public purposes. So sometimes you need to build the interstate highway system like they did under Eisenhower. Sometimes you need to do things like the Keystone XL pipeline for energy that has a public use. But that's different than something for just private gain. So I think individuals have a right to the vitality of their private property, and private property rights are very important to me. And we will absolutely, as president, not champion an expansive use of eminent domain power. Certainly by the federal government, it will be narrow as the founding fathers intended.
Where do you come in on the pipelines themselves? As you know, these projects are put together where they would aim to receive federal tax credits of some sort. There are some who believe that pipelines are not worth the investment. And you know, if you're worried about carbon, they have some I'm not smart enough to explain this, but those big machines that essentially suck the carbon out of the air that are given up are pipelines. I told you I wouldn't be able to explain that. Are the pipelines a worthy use of any kind of taxpayer assistance?
So this all goes back to Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and his Green New Deal. I oppose the Inflation Reduction Act. I oppose the Green New Deal. I think that you're talking about trillions of dollars that are going to end up being spent to try to re-engineer an economy that's ultimately not going to be in your best interest. For example, they want to kneecap production of reliable energy. They don't want to have new leases for things like oil and gas. And that's going to make it harder to fuel the electric grid or support the electric grid. Yet they want to force you to buy an electric vehicle. He wants to mandate that most vehicles in this country are electric, but a lot of consumers can't afford it. A lot of consumers don't want it. California has actually mandated, it hasn't taken effect yet, but it will soon, that you can't buy a new car in California unless it's electric. But then they turn around a couple days later and they put an announcement saying anyone that does have an electric vehicle, don't plug it in because their power grid can't hold all that stuff. So they have rolling blackouts. I think the sum total of Biden's government-dictated green energy policies are that you are going to have rolling blackouts throughout this country. When we deal with hurricanes, we got to get the power back on. I can just tell you, I can't rely on solar panels for that. I got to have the oil and the gas and the reliable energy. So we're going to open up all of our energy for production. We have great domestic supply, including biofuels here in the Midwest. I want American-produced energy with American jobs. I don't ever want us to go hat in hand to Venezuela or to Saudi Arabia for energy. Energy strength and dominance against what Biden's trying to do is good for consumers. You'll pay less in gas, you'll pay less in energy costs, but it's good for our national security because we control our own destiny.
As you look at that $34 trillion debt and a variety of energy industries that we subsidize or give credits in one way or another. Should the federal government be involved in that at all, or should it just step away and let the free market figure this out?
Well, look, I think that when you're talking about there's a whole bunch of different things that people will point to. Some are just basic business deductions, and they'll say that that's somehow a subsidy for like gas companies. No, if any business can do it, it's not any type of special thing. It's a business expense, depreciation costs, all that stuff is new. But here's what I think. Putting the thumb on the scale for government-dictated green policies is just not going to work. It hasn't worked anywhere that it's tried. China is eating our lunch on this. They want us to be more reliant on China for the things that fuel electric vehicles, the batteries and whatnot, and they want to make us more reliant and our allies more reliant on traditional energy from hostile countries. It makes no sense, and so we're going to open up. We're going to have an all-of-the-above strategy, and I think that we can be dominant in this field.
I have a specific one about wind in a sec, but just got one from Deborah in Minden. Why do you feel that ethanol is a worthy investment when you're talking about oil alternatives?
Well, look, I think biofuels are American-made. They produce good American jobs, and that they're part of an overall strategy to have strong energy policy where we control our own destiny. I think it's been a big part of the Midwest and the economy here. I think a lot of farmers have done better as a result of having that as an option. So, and that's one of the things I've been able to do just by traveling around. I've been to all 99 counties. I've been able to go to a lot of farms. I've been able to go and visit a lot of ethanol plants. And I've been able to talk to folks who've been impacted by this. What we're going to do is we're going to open up the blend wall because there's potential to do much higher blends, and people want to do it. Actually, actually, I think it was in Kansas. I was talking to a fella. I don't know that it's authorized, but they're doing higher blends, and people like it. And so, if there's a market for it, why not let them do higher blends? So you're going to see that, with the E15, and then even higher than that.
And you can get E15 in this state as well. Let's talk about that wind question here, specifically about wind turbines. As you made the drive, as you have numerous times going along I-80, you can see these going west and east. You can see these turbines all over. Now, Daniel from Hornick is not a fan of these wind turbines. He's looking at it like this is a dangerous assault on people's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness being destroyed under the guise of green energy. He does not like seeing the wind turbines dot the landscape. Where are you when it comes to wind?
Well, Daniel, clearly, I mean, we're not going to be imposing that from the federal government. I know in Florida, there's been a strong reaction against some of this stuff. I think our legislature is actually contemplating ensuring that they can't put up the wind stuff off the Florida's coast. Part of that is for tourism purposes, and part of that is just for protecting some of the birds and some of the other things. And I know they've had problems in New England with some of the marine life on it. So ultimately, that is not something that we will jam down from the federal government.
But if those are out on the Iowa landscape, you're fine with that? You see no reason to stop those?
Well, it's not.
If they're approved locally?
I think it's something that's more of a local question. I mean, what I don't want to get into is I believe a strong believer in the 10th Amendment. I want states to be able to govern themselves. If there's certain federal authority where we could be involved, that may be one thing. But on some of this stuff, I think it probably is outside the purview of the federal government to micromanage how a state would handle some of those issues.
Nikki Haley has talked about eliminating the gas tax. Do you support that on the federal level?
I mean, I would, but I think that, the reason why she's doing that is because she tried to raise gas taxes when she was governor of South Carolina. And that's something that hits consumers in a really, really big way. So I've never supported raising gas taxes. We need to be lowering energy costs. Part of that is by producing more, of course. And so we're going to be able to get that done. I think that whether Congress would ever do that, I think is probably something that's more of campaign rhetoric. But if that were on my desk, I would sign it.
Let's talk about Social Security. I know this is something that has come up at some of your town halls as people look longer term at this. How do you view the financial security of our Social Security system, and where do the changes have to happen?
Well, first, I think just to point out that senior citizens have earned these benefits. They've been taxed their whole life. Some people, say that these are the same as like entitlement programs or welfare programs, but that's not true. You've been taxed every paycheck you've ever had. You've been taxed for this. So promises made need to be promises kept. It's important that seniors have their Social Security. So for me, you can take that to the bank. That will happen. As governor of Florida, we've got a lot of Social Security recipients. And I think back also to my own family. My grandmother lived till 91. Social Security was her sole source of income. That's not true for every senior, but it is true for a lot. So especially when prices are rising, you get a cost of living adjustment, but that's not enough to handle what's happened with the increase in groceries and all the other attendant costs of just living a decent life. So it's important. I understand that. Now, we need to get interest rates down. We need to get inflation down. That will help the solvency of Social Security. It'll help us service the debt much better. That's important. Now, longer term for people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, that's going to be something that you're just going to have to work with Congress on in a bipartisan way to say, okay, what do we need to do to strengthen the program for the long term? But I don't support what others have proposed, Nikki Haley and others, to say sometimes reducing Social Security benefits in a high inflation environment. I don't think that makes any sense at all. I think that would be destructive for seniors.
A series of questions here regarding veterans, but then also international affairs. And I told you some of these will be the high heat. This is one from Alan in Atlantic. 2018, you said in an interview that as a legal advisor, you advised commanders at Guantanamo Bay on the legalities of force-feeding inmates who are on hunger strikes. This is considered torture by the UN. Can you expand on your role back then?
Well, first of all, that's just not true. This happens in prisons all the time where people do this, and there's interventions.
Hunger strikes, you mean?
Yeah, there's been interventions that are done just with court approval to keep people alive. So I think that's just something that a lot of the liberal corporate media has tried to spin up to doing that. I can tell you this. Just as a young naval officer, when I went down to Guantanamo Bay, I had an image of what was going on down there based on what the media was reporting. When you actually got down there, it was a very professionally run operation. They were following all the available rules. And as somebody that has served in Iraq as well, I can tell you, if you had a choice to be in Gitmo or in like the Fallujah local jail, Gitmo was much, much more humane. So a lot of that stuff, I think, was more of a narrative than anything based in fact.
Several of these want to know specifically when it comes to veterans about the large numbers who are homeless. You are a service member, and clearly we can point to a myriad ways where we have not fully supported veterans when they return home. So maybe first, if you can just go into the homeless side of this, what has to be done on a federal level?
So first, I'm the only veteran running for president. I'd be the first veteran who served in a foreign war elected president since 1988. So veterans issues are close to my heart. These will be top tier issues with me as president. And I don't think we've had a president that's put them front and center the way they should have been in my lifetime. So we will do that. Now, here's the thing. The homeless problem is largely a symptom of the underlying issue that the federal government has not done a good job of servicing veterans' mental health needs. People come back, and I remember being in Iraq and working with Marines and soldiers and naval special warfare folks who had been deployed constantly since 9/11. That's just not normal, especially in an environment where you may be standing a post, seeing people walking in front of you. You don't know who's a terrorist and who's not. Very high stress. You got to make split-second decisions. Of course, you see some of these people were engaged in significant arms fire, IED attacks, you name it. So veterans coming back that have post-traumatic stress, veterans that come back and get involved in substance abuse, that is not something that is unforeseen. War is hell. This is the stuff that happens. So two things. One, as Commander-in-Chief, I'm going to be mindful of the costs of that. I hope to never have to deploy troops. I believe in peace through strength. But if I do, I'm going to be mindful of the costs that go into that, and only if it's in our national interest to do. But we need to do a better job on dealing with the invisible wounds of war. Now, the VA has not done a good job. The VA is a massive bureaucracy. I'm going to fire some of these bad bureaucrats. We're going to bring accountability to the VA, but I don't think a bureaucracy that big ultimately can completely do the job. So what we're going to do is take something that we've done in Florida, a model of enlisting all these different parts of society who want to be helpful. So we have something in Florida called the Care Portal. We're going to have that in the VA. Veteran goes in, maybe they have post-traumatic stress. So yes, the VA can work to service that, but it goes into the portal. You have veterans organizations, charities, businesses, individual volunteers, churches, all plugged into the portal. Somebody, veteran, will have a need. Maybe they have post-traumatic stress. Maybe they got evicted from their apartment. All of a sudden, you'll have a church come and help the veteran. You'll have some of these veterans groups. We have groups in Florida that train service dogs to help veterans with post-traumatic stress. And guess what? The suicide rate goes down dramatically. It may even be something as simple as a veteran is really struggling. Somebody local in the community has agreed to volunteer. Maybe they just go up and say, you know what, thank you for your service. I care about you. Let me take you to lunch. Talk to me. What's going on? That could be the difference between somebody committing suicide or not. So I think the homeless problem flows out of the problems that we've had with mental health and substance abuse. We're going to have a totally new approach. We're not going to put all our eggs in the bureaucratic basket. We're going to use government to help facilitate these connections to so many great things that are going on in this country. Because I can tell you there are very few communities that I've been to, certainly in Florida, that do not want to help their veterans. Let's harness all that energy so we can actually achieve better outcomes.
One emailed in specifically about veterans benefits, saying that those are not enough and doesn't provide him what he needs. How do you address that? Pretty generic. But.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly what. I mean, obviously we have pension benefits that people can earn if they serve 20 years. Obviously, I support that. I think that that's important that we'll be able to do. Some of the health benefits, I think, very well may be inadequate. There's parts of the country where some of the VA system, the veterans give high marks to. There's others where it's not the case. So I don't think it's even throughout the country. But yes, there's when you're willing to put the cloth of your country on, particularly if you're injured and harmed in the process of discharging those duties, we have a responsibility to care for you. I mean, Lincoln, in his second inaugural address, one of the things he pointed out, wasn't a very long speech. He said to take care of those who bore the cost of battle for us, and we have responsibility as a society to do that.
We've had different periods in our history where men and women have signed up to join the military because of something. 9/11, one of the more recent ones from 20 plus years ago. As you have seen across the country, the military is struggling to get younger people to want to sign up, right? So what can change? What can change that?
Well, look, I'm one of the veterans that I had a different path in life planned, and then 9/11 happened, and so I decided that our country was in a conflict, and I needed to raise my hand and serve, and so I volunteered to join. Didn't necessarily make nearly as much money as I would have made if I were doing things in the private sector. Didn't get my schooling paid for, but the satisfaction of wearing the cloth of your country mattered to me. This was during the Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts. I volunteered to serve in Iraq. Wasn't necessarily the best conflict in the world at the time. There was a lot of problems going on there, but I felt that you have to stand up and serve. And I know a lot of veterans have felt this way. I think part of the reason why we're struggling, I think it's twofold. I think one is a lot of the political leaders have not done a good job in managing these conflicts. I mean, just think of what happened with Afghanistan. To leave behind billions of dollars worth of weapons and tanks and vehicles, and then to have 13 service members killed, that was humiliating for this country. And what does that message send to people that may be thinking about joining? Because when you join the military, you're writing a check payable for an amount up to and including your life to the United States of America. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know where they're going to send you. So I think a lot of the failures there have caused morale to go down and less people. I also think, largely driven by civilians, you have had political agendas imposed in the military. Things like woke, social experimentation, all that. That is not what the mission is about. And when people see that they're not putting the mission first, you think, well, that may not be the type of military I want to join right now. And I have veterans coming up to me in Iowa and beyond, and frequently they will say that they're not sure they would advise their kids or grandkids to join the current military. So as Commander-in-Chief on day one, I'm taking all the political nonsense out of the military. We're going to refocus it on mission first. Promotions are going to be done through merit and achievement. And that's the way it's going to be. That's going to create an increase in morale. And I think more people are going to want to serve. And I'll be very vocal as Commander-in-Chief and as a veteran that military service is a noble calling. You know, John F. Kennedy said that you can look back on your life with a great deal of pride and say, I served in the United States Navy. And that inspired a lot of people to want to join the Navy. Ronald Reagan said that some people spend a lifetime wondering if they've made a difference. U.S. Marines don't have that problem. And that's inspiring when you hear the Commander-in-Chief talk about what it means to wear the cloth of your country. So you can count on me to do that.
We do not have troops who have responded to Russia's attack in Ukraine. Ian from Sergeant Bluff messaged in that the U.S. does not need to be involved in Ukraine. This is something Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa has talked about and pushed back against, explaining why to her it is in the vital interest to stop Putin's attack. I know this is a topic that comes up in town halls when you take questions from folks. How do you explain to people why the U.S. has to be involved in this?
Well, look, I don't think as I'm president, you will not see any U.S. troops in Ukraine. I think that that's the way, unfortunately, it's heading. I don't think Biden would do that before the election. And I think there are other candidates running on the Republican side that may be willing to do that out there. I would not do that. I mean, I think that we have to look to see what is a vital interest, what's a secondary interest. And the way I look at it is Russia's primary threat is to the European countries. And yet some of these European countries aren't doing anything significantly to help. Some are, Poland, Finland, some others, but they should all be doing 2.5% of their GDP, our NATO allies, for their defense. We're in a situation where we face one peer competitor, and that peer competitor is China. And so my national security strategy is going to focus on making sure that we deter Chinese ambitions in the Indo-Pacific. That's going to require more naval strength. It's going to require us to be able to project more power in the Indo-Pacific. And yes, that's a strategy to deny them the ability to do things like invade Taiwan. But even beyond that, because they want to break out of that first island chain and dominate in the Indo-Pacific. I don't think you can spend hundreds of billions of dollars in Europe and also do what you need to do. So when I get in, yeah, Europe's going to be told some hard truths. You guys have to step up. You guys are going to have to get the job done. But I'd also think about some of the things that they've said, because, you know, you have some politicians saying, you know, Ukraine needs some more ammunition, some of these other things. But if you look at the amount of money total that's gone, most of that is non-military. They've sent your tax dollars to pay salaries for bureaucrats in Ukraine. They actually sent your money to pay pension payments for retired government workers in Ukraine. How is that America's responsibility, especially when we have our own southern border that's sitting wide open? So I think the two top security threats to this country is the rise of China and our own southern border. As Commander-in-Chief, I will deal with both of those starting on day one.
You mentioned education earlier, and we have several questions about education. One comes from Terry in Sioux City, and she's talking about education on a national level here. I understand that the Department of Education is a huge bureaucracy, in her words. Since its inception, U.S. test scores have plummeted. What's the solution here?
Well, the solution, Terry, is to recognize that the Department of Education has failed and to eliminate it and restore power to states and localities. Fact of the matter is, in Florida, we've leaned in on all these issues. We now rank 3rd and 4th, respectively, in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. We're a big, diverse state, and yet we have more school choice than anywhere in the country. We've got charter schools, we've got private schools, scholarships. We have scholarships for students with unique abilities, and even our public school districts have choice programs within those. That's the type of innovation we should want to spur. Unfortunately, the Biden administration uses the federal government and the federal Department of Education to try to fight back against states that are doing what their people want. For example, I signed legislation in Florida ensuring that our girls and women athletes can compete with fairness and integrity without having men injected into their competition. Biden administration opposed that. They want to have boys competing against the girls, and they were going to they tried to take away school lunch money from poor kids because we were protecting women's sports. So I think the whole U.S. DOE has been a big failure. I think what they've done in K-12 has not worked, and I think that we need a new approach.
If you do abolish it and push a lot of this back to the states, what happens, for example, with testing? How do we measure one state versus another? How do you know if your state's doing well?
Well, you do that. I mean, so for example, the NAEP exam, the nation's report card, that's administered on a state basis. So we do it. You absolutely can do that. The NAEP results in Florida, you saw the effect of school choice and the effect that we had kids in school during COVID when California and New York, some is not. They had huge learning loss as a result of what they did. Florida in fourth grade reading, fourth grade math had its best performance ever.
All right, we're in our final 10 minutes, so I'm going to bounce all over the place. We have a lot of many unrelated questions. Stacy from Sioux City has a very direct question, but perhaps get at the core of anybody running for this office. As simple as possible here. What is your main reason why you want to be president?
Well, Stacy, we're in jeopardy of being the first generation of Americans to leave to our kids and grandkids in America less prosperous and less free than the one we inherited. If that happens, we'd be the first generation of Americans to do that. I am not going to stand idly by and watch the managed decline of this country. And I'm running for president because we need to reverse this country's decline. We need a new birth of freedom, and we need to usher in a revival of the American spirit. And I'm the leader that can get the job done.
All right, Terry wants to know the 3 strengths you feel that you uniquely bring to this race.
Well, thanks. I think that's a great question. I mean, one, I think the fact that I'm a veteran. I think we need another veteran as president. We haven't had one in a while. I think that's really, really important. 2, I have a record of achievement that's second to none. If you look in Florida, all my promises I delivered on 100%. We were able to defeat the left, defeat the teachers union, defeat George Soros, defeat the ACLU, the Dems, all this stuff on all these key issues. You need somebody that has that proven record. And then I think having leadership and judgment and an ability to actually articulate a vision and bring that in. I showed an ability to do that in Florida through some pretty turbulent times. If you look at COVID-19, governors have not been tested like that in our lifetimes. Some failed. In Florida, we really set the standard for how we handled that, and now our state is doing better than others. But leadership, it's not about entertainment. Leadership's not about showmanship. Leadership is ultimately about producing results for the people that you represent. And I had to make decisions during COVID that put the interests of my people, their jobs, and their freedom over my own personal political interests, because I was getting hammered all the time for a lot of the decisions I was made to buck conventional wisdom. And I was perfectly willing to let the political chips fall where they may, because I had to stand up for those folks. So I'll be a president that will fight for you. And it's one thing to say that when the wind's at your back. It's much more difficult to do that when they're shooting at you and slinging arrows at you. You can count on me, though. When the chips are down and you need someone standing up for you, I'll be the guy to do that.
We've had a bunch of questions that have talked about polls. And as you know, we talked before this started tonight that this was not going to be a bunch of inside baseball poll questions. So I will just phrase one in this way, which is a little indelicate perhaps, but for some of these people who are trying to find the distinction between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, when someone calls you and accuses you of trying to be Trump light, how do you respond to that?
If you look at what happened with what we've done in Florida, I've delivered on policies that conservatives and Republicans have wanted for years, even before Donald Trump was ever even a Republican, much less was president of the United States. And, you know, I have a lifetime of service to this country. I have a lifetime of record of putting service above self. who else takes, I had degrees from some of the most prestigious universities in the country. I could have made a lot of money doing a lot of different things, and yet I volunteered to serve in Iraq and join our military. Not a lot of people do that who end up running for office. So we have a record of putting the country first, putting your interest before my own interest, and actually delivering on all these results. I mean, with all due respect to Donald Trump, he's running in 2024 on a lot of the same things that he promised in 2016 and didn't deliver. And had he delivered on building the border wall, Biden would not have been able to bring in this many millions of illegal aliens, because the wall's a physical fact of life. That's why we supported that. So I think if you look at how we've delivered in Florida, the record is second to none. And I think those people who say things like that, I don't even know that they know they're talking about. And oh, by the way, who's the number one guy that all these people have been going after, spending $40 million? Trump and Haley have spent all the money attacking me because they see me as the threat. And a lot of people in Washington see me as the threat. A lot of the New York and D.C. corporate media outlets have been gunning for me from day one, trying to do anything they can to do, because I think they know if nominated, I will win. But even more important than that, when I get to Washington, there'll be a new sheriff in town. We need a change agent in D.C. We can't just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic.
All right, we're down to our last couple of minutes, so I have to smash a couple of questions together, but and it's a serious matter. It involves faith here, so it may be indelicate to do that. But how does faith guide you, and give people an example of where you relied on that and made a decision as governor because of that? But then the other side of that from these folks is, how do you make sure that there exists a separation between church and state, essentially?
Well, faith in God is just who I am, and my faith is my foundation. It's how I am able to deal with issues when the seas are choppy, when people are gunning for you. I put on that full armor of God, and that allows me to have the strength to be able to lead. We saw this when my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer. Major thing. I mean, our kids were 4, 3, and 1 at the time, and we didn't know, what was going to happen. The prayers we got from people, not just in Florida, but throughout the country, lifted her spirits. It lifted our family spirits in a way that was really powerful. And I'm a firsthand believer in the power of prayer. And as governor, I think I would not have been able to stand strong during COVID, during some of the fights we had where we beat Disney on the transgender ideology, keeping that out of the schools and the elementary schools, because you got a lot of people that gun for you. And so I think having that faith, the faith in God, really gives you the foundation where you're standing strong for what's right. Now, in terms of how that relates beyond that, I mean, we're a diverse country. I mean, just in Iowa, I've gone to a number of different denominations, and they all have, great traditions. And government needs to be neutral amongst that. I mean, there's not going to be an established denomination versus others, but we are a country that is based on the idea that our rights come from God, not from the government. That's in the Declaration of Independence. And you absolutely have a right to not just go to church on Sunday and practice your faith there, but to live your faith in what you do in your daily lives. We're going to make sure that we restore religious liberty in this country, because when you have situations where a football coach like Coach Kennedy is losing his job in Washington State because he led a voluntary prayer at midfield after a high school game, he has to go all the way to the Supreme Court. That is not what our founding fathers intended. They absolutely intended that your faith would be an important part of who you are, and that you have a right as a free citizen to live that out to the fullest.
A handful of questions looking beyond the primary, looking to you becoming the nominee. I know you haven't talked specifically at people's names as far as running mates, I don't believe. But can you talk about the type of person, qualities you would need for a team? Yeah,
look, I think that I have two main qualities.
If you want to drop names, do that too if you like.
That are non-negotiable. One, the individual has got to be able to be president if it comes to that. And there should be no question. I'm partial to governors because I think governors have the best training in terms of actually having to make executive decisions and then also working with the legislative branch to be able to advance policy. The second thing is it's got to be somebody that shares our vision, because what you don't want to have happen is put someone on the ticket. We run on a certain vision for this country. God forbid something happens to me, and then the person that fleets up ends up going in a different direction than what the voters voted for. So I think those two are non-negotiable, and I think those are much more important than some of the other political considerations that get thrown out. You need somebody that could do the job and somebody that shares your values.
All right, we have half a minute left. The successful caucus candidates in Iowa history always have what is essentially a bumper sticker message that folks think about when they show up, and this time it'll be January 15th. Usually reflects kind of what their theme, what their mission is. What's your bumper sticker message about why you and not somebody else?
Very simple. Donald Trump is running on his issues. Nikki Haley is running on her donors' issues. I'm running on your issues, your family's issues, and turning this country around. That'll be my sole focus. It's not about me. Got a lot of humility in doing this. As a leader, I'm just a vessel for your hopes, dreams, and aspirations. I will get the job done for you.
Governor Ron DeSantis, first candidate to sit down in this statewide conversation. We appreciate safe travels.
Yeah.
January 15th, caucus night, and stay with us, stay tuned. We'll tell you when we have the next candidate slotted for this, but we are now down to just 13 days, so stay tuned.